Mullin, and I'm the Associate Director for Strategic Initiatives at FDA Center for Drugs. And I'm going to further welcome you to this workshop today, this 2021 virtual workshop. And I'm going to basically take maybe a step back here, but talk a bit more about FDA's motivation for initiating this effort and funding the work that c-path and NORD have been doing. And I'm going to start that by talking about and reviewing the context and motivation for it. And this goes back to recognizing that there are as many as 7,000 plus rare diseases, that although these conditions are individually rare, that there are an estimated 25 to 30 million Americans who are living with rare diseases. And although there's been a lot of progress made in diagnosing and treating, most of these diseases do not have an approved therapy. FDA is working with patients, rare disease patients, investigators, and drug companies, and they're often working alone and in a somewhat siloed mode of operation and struggling with the same challenges. And that's what we're seeing, that there are really large knowledge gaps about the natural course of disease in many cases. And with the small and dispersed patient population, it's hard to conduct or even to plan randomized controlled trials, which would be the norm in larger populations. And so there are a number of challenges with rare disease drug development. I'm going to talk about a few of them that I think the work we're trying to do in the Rare Disease Cures Accelerator is particularly trying to address. And those concern characterizing rare diseases, measuring what matters to patients, and designing trials that really can work with the challenges of rare disease populations. And so to begin with, in terms of characterizing, you have to characterize any disease before drug development to really be able to know what to measure and how to design a trial. But there are particular challenges with rare diseases, including what's known about the disease, what are the main defining problems, are there well-defined lab tests to, for example, diagnose the disease, what's the natural history of the disease, what does that look like, how does it change over time, how can we quantify this, can we quantify it, how variable are the symptoms and experiences across the patients who experience the condition, and what are the implications for trial design, and also what do we know about what causes the disease, and understanding the underlying causes of the disease. And so in terms of characterizing the disease, developing these characterizations poses a greater challenge for rare disorders because of that small population size and the potentially greater variability across the affected population. And, while lab tests may be available for rare disease study, they may have been pioneered in the labs of individual researchers, and they may not be adequately standardized. And thus the reliability and the predictability of that test results can be uncertain, and that can limit its value in terms of development of scientific evidence on which one can base a regulatory approval, for example. And in addition to that, there are other aspects of characterizing disease. Natural history studies can play a really critical role, but their role can be limited and the opportunities missed if in fact the efforts lack if this data doesn't have clear standards, or if there's not a standardized set of data that's being collected in a consistent way to manage and coordinate that collection, and including the plans for data protection and data sharing. Disease pathogenesis is another challenge area because many rare diseases are due to single gene defects, but may feature multiple mutations of any specific gene. And if you in this environment of somewhat siloed operation, genetic characterization of a rare disease might be done by an individual, say academic researcher, without the benefit of standardization of the methods and approaches. And this can lead to a fragmented diversity of methods, and that can yield data that are difficult to compare or aggregate to support drug development and decision-making. In terms of measuring what matters, this is critical to understand the patient's perspective on the burden of the disease and current therapy and what should be measured and what would constitute a meaningful change. And this can provide a lot of insight for the clinical context for regulatory review. It can also provide direct evidence of benefits and risks if it's captured with methodologically sound clinical outcome assessment tools and endpoints. However, what we see is a lot of separate, uncoordinated effort going on with these COAs, so-called COAs, and endpoints by different researchers and sponsors and advocacy groups. And this can really slow the progress because in some cases these are good measures, but they're proprietary and they may have limited availability or affordability to researchers and sponsors who would like to use them. Some of these tools are not as reliable, and the methods are not, and what's collected is not as valid as it needs to be for regulatory decision making. And if you're collecting data in a way that's not valid and reliable, and it's not thus interpretable, that again limits the ability to use this information in decision making about benefits and risks. So the Rare Disease Cures Accelerator effort is intended to address a couple of challenges, and I'll just talk about the one related to measuring what matters right now. And so FDA, one of the things we've done is funded the development of standard core clinical outcome assessment sets for specific disease domains that are relevant across multiple rare diseases, and COAs, in terms of what other terms that you might use here, are patient-reported outcomes, for example, is a kind of clinical outcome assessment measure. Clinician-reported outcomes, observer-reported outcomes, and performance-based measures. These are various types of what we call COAs. And to date, we have funded 3 projects, particularly in the rare disease area, and one is focusing on developing some standard measures for acute pain in infants and young children. Another effort is on physical functioning measures that can be applicable across a range of rare conditions. And another is on communication ability for individuals with rare neurodevelopmental disorders. And we hope that this will also be applicable across a range of relevant rare diseases. Now, another area of challenge, it has to do with clinical trial design, and a number of factors can affect and make it difficult in the context of rare diseases. The current understanding of the disease may not be clear enough to predict whether the proposed trial design would be able to detect the effect of the drug or whether a therapy works. Traditional randomized controlled trials, I'm sorry, I didn't advance my slide here. I'm sorry, folks. I'm going back to this slide. Traditional randomized controlled trials may not be a viable option if you've got a very small population, and you may want to use natural history study data if possible, or other real-world data as an external control arm. That's possible. And rare disease development may require novel or potentially complex trial designs, given the limited number of patients, maybe novel endpoints. But those need to be designed in a way that's going to be rigorous enough. And so if those designs are, a bit ad hoc, or there's poorly specified endpoints, too few patients involved, it won't produce the adequate evidence needed for regulatory decision making again, and not supporting the approval, which is what we would really want to see. And so the Rare Disease Cures Accelerator is really going to support a number of these things I've just mentioned with regard to that disease characterization and trial design, really critical components. This data analytics platform is going to support the ability to address some of these challenges, provide a disease-neutral background data framework for the conduct of standardized natural history studies, and the vision here is an overlay of that with specific disease-specific data layered onto that, and allowing a more rapid, standardized, yet customizable approach to be able to develop natural history studies, to examine clinical trial designs, and find designs that are going to be effective for use in studies. And this will help overcome some of these really important challenges that we face. The way we see it today, that this is the rare disease drug development ecosystem has tremendous dedication by the people involved in it, but there's this variability and fragmentation that really inhibits people's ability to make the progress they want to make, with varying levels of disease expertise because of because the conditions are rare, variability in the level of drug development experience in the people that are trying to do this work, the level of resources they have, and the access to information and to patients and to the quality of the tools they're able to use. We know that patients and families want to engage in this effort and help in every way they can to ensure the availability of drugs to treat themselves or their family members, their children. And so this is a great opportunity for us that we have in place now. So the RDCA-DAP is meant to overcome these challenges and help address this. So provide more system-level learning, and that sharing of information that Jeff talked about, we think would really, in this platform, is going to enable that system-level learning. So with that, some of the issues we heard about in a Duke Margolis workshop here that we think the platform can help address, and I think they'll hear about this today. In this meeting in the summer of 2020, there were some industry stakeholders that said that they would be less inclined to contribute data to engage in this kind of effort if they were concerned about losing competitive advantage. Or we heard from academic stakeholders, some of them were concerned about sharing their data before publishing their study results because that may enable some other research team to use that data to publish their findings first, and this is really affecting their ability to be successful in their work. And there also was concern that clinical investigators not be overburdened by the reporting that would be involved. Their primary role is to take care of the patients that they are seeing and not data collection. So how can we design studies so that the research can be done, but people are not burdened? And so with that, I think we heard there's Jeff described what's going to be covered today. There's a very exciting workshop planned for today, and it'll provide an update on the initiative and what's being done to address these kinds of challenges through this shared platform to create this development ecosystem that we need and effective new medicines for rare diseases. And with that, I want to thank you again for joining us today and welcome you to the workshop.